my name is Sandra Bundy. I'm a member of the Stop Offshore Drilling in the Atlantic crew. I'm a founding member of the Business Alliance to Protect the Atlantic Coast and a lifetime resident of Georgetown County.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Hemingway, and I am the president and founder of the Gullah Chamber of Commerce, the Gullah Chamber Foundation, also a member of Stop Offshore Drilling in the Atlantic, and probably some of the stuff that you said also. And and we're friends and colleagues in environmental stuff
Yes.
and ocean stuff and waters and waterways.
Clean water.
Yeah, and I'm glad to be here. Yeah.
So, what was your defining moment in your love for the ocean?
I think my defining moment was when my mother would take us to McKenzie Beach on Saturdays, and we would spend the day with my mother and my brothers crabbing and fishing at McKenzie Beach, which is the historic African American beach in Georgetown County. And it just really, it wasn't a defining moment, it has an aha moment. But over the years, as we would go out, not only did it bring me closer to nature, it brought me closer to my family as we were out bonding together and actually eating too. We would take bushels of crabs back home and eat them. So it kind of gave us that family time while we were out in nature. And that has always stayed with me. Gave me a love of nature.
You know, interesting that you mentioned family because that's kind of where my love for all things Ocean Creek kind of started.
Mm-hmm.
My family business, or my father and mother, had a marina, and it was right on the water there in Merle's Inlet. And so one of my first jobs, I joke with people, but it's true, was one of my first jobs was a minute counter. But actually, when I was probably 5 or 6 years old, we used to sell, like most kids would have a lemonade stand. We would have a fiddler crab stand on the old government dock, and we would sell fiddler crabs for the fishermen going out to fish there.
I'm assuming you were selling the fiddler crabs as bait.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Yeah,
All right.
in the little Dixie cups.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Good deal. So both of us had the family connection that opened us to nature, to the water, to the oceans. So pretty good deal.
Right. Yes. And, you know, it was when I grew up, and I'm sure just like when you grew up, it's all about what we're going to get, what we're going to have for, what fish are we going to catch?
Yeah, I have a brother he's the family fisherman, and every opportunity he gets, he's either fishing or crabbing. As a matter of fact, before he married his wife, one of the tests that she had to go through, and it was a test, he took her out to McKenzie Beach crabbing. And that also told us that he was serious about her because she was the only girlfriend that he actually took crabbing with him to McKenzie Beach. And she came back and said, I passed the test, I did it, and that's the last time I'm going crabbing. And that's true. She never went back crabbing again. But that's our family. With us, we go crabbing together. We bring the crabs back, and we teach me and my nieces and nephews from when they're knee high how to open crabs, the blue crabs and everything. So we teach them from there, from knee high to love crabbing and how to open them and everything. So it's a whole family tradition thing.
And for us in Merle's Inlet, we had the oysters, and it was like, oh, we couldn't wait to go to the oyster roast and
Yeah.
be able to skip rocks outside. See how many times you can make a skip. But being able to go to the oyster roast as a family and have, I mean, it was like full of people and everybody's there, and it's, who gets the biggest oyster or who doesn't, and who gets their
or who can
hand
open
cut,
them,
who
how
can
to open them. You can
Right.
tell the difference from beignets and kamyas, who can know how to open the oysters and everything. So the struggle. So yeah,
But back then, there wasn't so many people here as there are today.
that's true. It was more community who was here. It was smaller population. We've lost some of that because there are more people here, and then people have left also.
Right.
Yeah.
But with the more people here, that's why I have grown increasingly concerned about the health of our estuary and our waters and our ocean.
I'm concerned also. I remember, and we're sitting right in front of it, the Sanpet River. We would go crabbing at East Bay Park, and I remember it was about middle school when the signs started going up saying, we recommend that you only take like one fish a week out of here to eat. And we used to go to the landing at East Bay Park, and we could get bushels of crabs there. But we stopped. We stopped at that point because with more people, more industry, now you're getting toxins and runoff into the water, and it's just not safe. It's just not healthy. And I think we just need to be more conscious of what gives us sustenance we have to take care of.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you and I've talked about this before. I think there's a disconnect from nature in that it provides sustenance, it sustains us, where it's more of a recreational view of it, of I can use it and take what it provides for me, but I'm not giving back the nurturing of what sustains me. And this is I don't even want to say it's a two-way street because it's more nuanced than that. But what you're taking your abundance from, you have to continue nurturing that and taking care of it so it will continue providing you that sustenance. And that's the difference between sustenance and recreational use.
Right, and that's a lot of what we're concerned about in Murrells Inlet in particular with our oyster harvesting beds. I mean, we're seeing more and more polluted runoff, non-point source, and actually it's all just stormwater. And we don't have any industry pumping anything in like there is here, but people, recreational boaters, they're also running around out there a little bit too fast sometimes. It's eroding some of the salt marsh banks, then you're covering up your oysters. They can't grow. So,
and marine debris getting into the oyster beds. I was someplace else. I think it was in Georgia, and I was having a conversation, and one of the oyster harvesters, well, Beaufort County, one of the oyster harvesters was telling me one of the problems they have is people dumping boats, and then the water takes the boats and they end up in oyster beds, and now you got the fuel leaking into the oyster beds. You got the boat itself destroying the baby oysters and the grass and all of that. That marine debris is a serious problem also. And I think also people don't realize that when you're destroying nature, you're also destroying culture. And for the Gullah Geechee, oyster beds, shrimping, crabbing, I speak of it as family, but my family's Gullah Geechee. So when we can't get that sustenance from the oyster beds, the shrimp, the crabs, it's a cultural thing. And that too starts being impacted in a negative way. And people have to start leaving because they're no longer able to harvest out of the oyster beds or do the shrimping or the crabbing or the fishing. So we're starting to also see the negative impact on our culture also. And losing those traditions, those cultural traditions of harvesting. I was going to ask you a question because this came up in Beaufort, the Gullah Geechee nurturing, maintaining the oyster beds. Who maintains the oyster beds in Murrells Inlet?
well, everybody that has a lease actually out there has to take care of their beds and reseed them. But DNR does the recreational beds, the state grounds that are open for harvesting. That's usually who does it. In the SCORE program, they're trying to get the beds they're building new oyster reefs and trying to get people to recycle their shells because they're not getting enough shell back.
Well, they need to work with the culture.
Yes. Yes.
They could get more oyster shells back if they work with the culture and, so that we know that needs to be done. And actually it's being done to a certain extent. What we've run into is that Gullah Geechee oyster harvesters are nurturing and maintaining the beds, but they're not receiving the leases.
Right.
So that's problematic. They're not getting the benefit of nurturing those beds and reseeding.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a lot of work that we need to do.
For sure.
Yeah. But we could do it. We can do it. I started my environmental work because reduce, reuse, recycle, which is actually a cultural thing, but I wasn't introduced to it as a cultural thing. No one came to me and said, let's reduce, reuse, recycle because it's cultural. It was just in my house, recycling was very important. And with my mother, it was like sorting plastic from paper and aluminum cans and stuff like that. It's not until I was older that I started making the cultural connections. And as I tell folks when I'm introducing the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, we are descendants of enslaved West Africans who were brought here because of their knowledge of how to control water and manage the land to grow rice, indigo, sugarcane, and sea island cotton, but also our connection to the seafood and the cultural traditions to capture that seafood, making the baskets where the fish would swim into the baskets, but the design of the baskets, they couldn't swim out. So you make the baskets out of the grass, then you put it in the water, the fish go in, and they can't come out. That's how you eat. Most of the time it's for sustenance. You go crabbing in different ways, and it's really based on those cultural traditions that we were passed down. And no one actually said this was a cultural tradition. So in our heads, we were thinking it's a family tradition. But where did the family tradition come from? The culture. As an adult, I started making the connections to the culture. Also, as an adult, I started appreciating who I was as Gullah Geechee. And you cannot disconnect us from the water because it is from across the water from whence we came. Our ancestors being kidnapped and brought here. You hear us sing about the water. The Jordan River is deep and wide, wade in the water. You hear it in our Gullah spirituals because not only is from whence the water we came as enslaved people, but we escaped or emancipated ourselves from right back over that water. So once I started learning all of those cultural traditions and connections and started appreciating who I am as Gullah Geechee, that's what really drives my environmental work. And if I don't, as a Gullah Geechee, as a human being, nurture and maintain what gives me sustenance, then not only does it impact me, it impacts the entire world. And I think that can actually be said for all indigenous people. The traditions of the indigenous are all embedded in natural traditions, and it's about maintaining what gives us sustenance.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I'm third generation Merle's Inlet, and we grew up right, like I say, right there at the estuary. And everything we did was around the water, fishing, crabbing, shrimping. And when my father brought the Gulf Stream fishing boat, I mean, it was a big deal because nobody could get to the Gulf Stream as fast as he could, which, 2.5 hour trips taking out passengers, that was really a big thing. And we'd have 200 or 300 people in the afternoons coming down to see the boats come down, come back and unload.
Mm-hmm.
But, and that started my love of the ocean even more. I remember going out and watching the dolphins ride in the bow, and I was just like, oh, I love this. And you'd see the flying fish jump out. And when I had learned about the offshore drilling coming to potentially right here in Georgetown,
Mm-hmm.
and then I heard your story about how you were in a meeting somewhere and they said, oh, we're going to put it in Georgetown.
The refineries in
Right.
Georgetown.
But
Mm-hmm.
and that, from that I mean, obviously before I cared about the ocean and what was happening, but once the offshore drilling was like, they're bringing it to South Carolina, it's like, well, no, we're not. We're going to do everything possible to keep that from happening. And then even now, tying together, you know, this fossil fuel industry's new game plan about pumping out plastic every way they can to fill our oceans. And I mean, it's our responsibility as consumers to decide what we're going to use, but it's really hard sometimes to get away with what is being pushed upon us in the way of packaging and everything else. And I think a lot of people don't put those two things together necessarily. But from that time and now, it's like the Business Alliance to Protect the Atlantic Coast is looking into, you know, what our position should be as far as plastic pollution in the ocean goes. We're probably looking to have some roundtables and things like that. But, you know, people that are in business that want to learn more about ways to reduce their plastic footprint. I mean, just think about the old ways. We used to have a glass if you got a glass of water. I mean, I love some of these restaurants now. People are asking for straws and they're saying, we don't have them. And that is like, bravo. But there's just simple things you can do to reduce the plastics situation, which is impacting our shellfish, our crabs, our shrimp, and our ocean.
I think we need to, in an ideal world, every municipality needs to look at zero waste. I wish my hometown, Georgetown, would step up and be a leader in South Carolina along the East Coast in zero waste, because speaking of plastic, we're at the point now in the ocean, anything that we take out of the ocean, we're eating microplastic. And any plastic in our body is poisoning us because that's plastic. It's made out of oil. So it's just not natural. Yet it's to the point now with microplastics that we don't even see it anymore, but it's in our bodies. And it's not doing us any good. So our goal, I think, not only in an economic sense, but also for health of us, the human beings, is we've got to get plastic out of the systems. And I'm glad to hear more restaurants are just saying we're just not using straws anymore. But I think even on a household level, we need to go back to China, glass. And these are just individual decisions that we need to make that impact society as a whole.
That's one of the reasons that the Chirping Birds, actually, we used to have zero waste events. And somebody would lug all that china, whatever. If we were giving out cookies, you'd get a napkin. You weren't getting no plastic plates. And if you were getting a drink, it was in a glass. And they weren't all matched, but, you know, it can be done.
That's called character when they don't match. But I mean, you think about it now. Yeah, I think even say like the wedding industry, I've noticed some photo layouts where people have mismatched plates and cups and all. I think we need to start seeing the beauty in the odd, the differences, the diversity, and even nature. Every color is in nature, but it all works together. And I think as humans, we need to take that approach when we start removing plastic and not worry about uniformity, but the mismatch, the odd need to be normalized. And that will get us to zero waste. So Oceana, wonderful organization. And I think what they can do to support us is to make an investment, and I think this is moving more in that direction, in historically excluded communities, and sit down at the table with us and see what the needs are. And let's be honest, most of the time the needs are financial. the work is being done, but we live in a capitalistic society that tends to leave the money at the top, and it doesn't trickle down to the folks who are doing the work on the grassroots level, and that needs to change. Because if on the grassroots level we make real investment, that will lift all boats. That's that old cliche, and it will. If the historically excluded community does well, all communities will do well. And it really does come to financial support. So more direct financial support is if you wanted to support the environmental work, the economic work of the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, we have the GullahGeecheeChamber.org website and the GullahGeecheeFoundation.org website, or you can call us at 843-318-8644, and let's talk. Let's talk about how you can volunteer, how you can make donations to support our work.
So, I'm, as a member of the Business Alliance to Protecting the Atlantic Coast, I mean, we have people all up and down the eastern seaboard, and we really like to engage with new business members. We're always looking for new business members to join our efforts, and we fully, our website, we have forms on there where you can sign up to join. We are still looking at, protecting the health and economic vitality of the Atlantic coast, and if we don't have that because we're polluting it and we're not paying attention to the offshore drilling issues, not only that, but the plastics issues, and more in the future, we're going to be dealing with the impacts of climate change on our business members, and we really need to hear from people in the business community so that we can understand where we should best focus our efforts. And that website is protectingtheatlanticcoast.com.